That's my.
Hello and welcome to another segment of Intersections, Policy, Program, and Practice Exchange. My name is Elisa William, and today I have the pleasure to be speaking with Executive Director of Mental Health America, Duchess, Andrew O'Grady, and Professor of Psychology and Director of the Center of Aging and Disability Policy at Mount St. Mary College, Dr. Larry Force. Larry, you want to get us started?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Alyssa, for, as always, facilitating, moderating this and bringing us all together. As Alyssa said, my name is Dr. Larry Force. I'm a professor of psychology at Mount St. Mary College, and with my dear friend and colleague, Dr. Kahana, we run a Center on Aging and Disability Policy. We're so glad to be here. We're now wrapping up season 3, coming into season 4. What started off as a conversation with Andrew, and I said to him, look, there has to be a way for us to get this information out, even underneath the circumstances we're all living on and living under, with COVID and quarantine, not quarantine. And in other projects that I've been involved in, I stumbled across this. Let's do a Zoom call, send it out through our network. And one project in particular, funded by New York State, we started off with a mailing list of about 400 people. We're now over 4,000. So I know that this format works. So I said to him, hey, listen, what about trying to elevate, this idea of addictions and recovery to a national level? And how we got here is that about 6-7 years ago, myself and 2 friends, Jim Ball and Dave Brinkerhoff, we formed a nonprofit called the National Organization of Adult Addictions and Recovery, because we noticed there was a gap, in services for adults in the recovery world. And the foundation of it was from a theory that I created back in 2003 called the theory of dimensionality. And it's a here and now solution focused type of approach. And theories are great, but you need a program. And the program that we created is called Dimensional Solution Based Treatment. And then from the program, we created an intervention called Intersections. 8-week program, here and now, based on health and wellness and empowerment, dealing with addictions and recovery. So you can have a theory, you can have a program, you can have an intervention, but you have to have a place to try it. So I contacted Andrew. Andrew and I are, friends for 30 some odd years. I said, look, this is what we have. He said, come on in. So we tried it, and it has been a home run. The feedback we're getting, the impact that we're having, we know that this works. And as I mentioned to Jean Marie, who's our guest today, we started off locally, then we went statewide, then national, and now we're having exchanges and dialogues and video guests internationally. So we know that our voice is being heard. But let me be very clear, we would not be sitting here if it wasn't for Andrew O'Grady. So with that, I'd like to introduce Andrew, and he's going to introduce our guest. So Andrew?
Yeah, so as Larry described, the intervention Intersections, which is about an 8-week module, we've been doing that in our Bolger House, Florence Manor, and Dowling House. These are our community residences for people who are in either early or later recovery. And it has really been beneficial. We have surveys that go out pre and post, and everybody seems to have gained something from it. I was always looking for more activities and more interventions that could happen in these community residences, because people are there and they go to their treatment, but with COVID, a lot of their treatment was online. And so we wanted to add to that. I've always wanted to add to that. And this approach includes nutrition, it includes yoga, movement, all sorts of activities that are better than the activities that maybe people were participating in before. So that's going really well. And then we branched out and said, let's do these video casts. And they haven't been focused on the intersections approach. They've been focused on just policy, recovery models, people who have been in recovery and what their story was and how they got there. And today I'm really happy that we have Jean Marie Niebor here. Sorry, the name is tough. It's tough, but I got it. She is our Deputy Commissioner of Behavioral Health here in Dutchess County. And she, I've known her for quite some time, but I would love to hear her story, how she got to this community. I do know that she has a long history in dealing with the addiction world and dealing with law enforcement and doing CIT training. And these are the areas that we talk about a lot on these episodes. So I was really excited to be able to ask her, and she said yes, and to get some sense of, where she came from, what led her to this field, and then, how she sees things going forward. One of the great things about Dutchess County, I'm sure she'll mention it, is that they partnered with Minkoff, who is working with the county on doing exactly what we've been talking about here for 4 seasons, which is, this no wrong door thing, where people should get duly trained so that, somebody isn't walking into one door, oh, now you have to go over here and wait 3 weeks for this because you're not appropriate. And so I'm really happy to see that happening in Dutchess. And I hope it holds, because Jean Marie will tell you, I mean, I've been doing this for 30 years, and, it seems like 28 years ago, there was this big push for this, and then it kind of happens and everybody does their trainings and it kind of goes away, and we still have the people directed to the silos. But I think we're moving in a good direction, and I'm really happy. We had Marcus Molinaro on before, and this county is really ahead of the curve when it comes to what we have available to people and how we're thinking about things. So with that, I want to introduce Jean Marie and just ask her to tell us a little bit about herself and how she ended up. She's new to this role, and she came from the institution itself and moved up, as opposed to taking somebody from outside. And frankly, I think that was a great move, because Jean Marie has the experience of knowing intimately what's happening in this community and what's going on. So I'm really happy that she got appointed to that position. And I want to introduce you. And Jean Marie, if you could tell us a little bit about you.
Thanks, Andrew. And thank you so much for having me today. This is so exciting. I'm really happy to be a part of it. So I actually started my career as a music therapist, and I worked with children with autism. That was my very first foray into the professional world, and worked at our local hospital, St. Francis Hospital, for about 8 years. And at that point, I was really looking for more professionally and decided to become a social worker. So went on nights and weekends, got my master's in social work, and then spent a number of years working with people with developmental disabilities. And then I worked in the public mental health system for the remainder of my career in various capacities. For a very long time, I really was what I would consider to be a clinical practitioner, just a clinician. And I was working with people on a one-on-one basis, and getting to know them and helping them meet whatever goals they had for themselves, and helping them uncover those goals. It was wonderful work. At a certain point, I became a little frustrated with the public mental health system and the way things were working, and decided that I wanted to try to be part of more of a system-wide solution, looking for approaches that help address systems issues and looking at things on with a macro lens. And one of my favorite things to do is really think about how our system impacts individuals and how our individuals impact the system, and trying to find gaps that exist and fill them. I never saw myself in this role. I'm absolutely honored and privileged to have it, because I really see this role as one that can impact the system. And so I feel very fortunate to be in the position to be able to really work with our partners. And just to reiterate what Andrew was saying, Dutchess County is very unique. I've worked in many other counties, and we just don't see the collaboration that we have here in Dutchess. There's a lot of putting people in the same room and trying to find solutions to problems. And to me, that's one of the most creative and satisfying things that we can do is put people together. And I think, oftentimes we don't agree necessarily on things, but I think we all are headed in the same direction. We all have this desire to really make life better for people and address the needs of the community. And having that unifying goal really does bring us together in a way that's very special, I think. So that's a little bit about me and how I got here.
What about a day in the life of? What's the rhythm of the day?
Well, I would say that I've never had the same day twice since I took the role. And that's because not only am I the deputy commissioner for our department, but I'm the deputy commissioner for a blended department, which is our health department and our mental health department. So our two departments are under one umbrella. Shortly after I took this position, our commissioner resigned. And so I very quickly learned about the operations of the entire department. And my colleague and assistant commissioner of the department, Anthony Ruggiero, he and I have been sort of running the ship together since then. So we still have that pesky pandemic that just will not seem to go away. So our department is running all the COVID response in addition to managing all the behavioral health programming for the community. So there's a lot of variation in my day-to-day. I do a lot of meetings, but the topics can vary widely. And I also have significant clinical oversight and intervention. So Dutchess County runs a 24-hour hotline called Helpline that is staffed with behavioral health clinicians, open 24 hours a day. And that serves as sort of a portal to lots of different things, including when someone has to be involuntarily transported to the emergency room for evaluation, a psychiatric evaluation. So I have to be available to sign off on those, and those can happen at any time, day or night. And so that's one thing that could happen over the day. We also actually run programs here. So we have two clinical programs within this building that are directly run by my department. We have our an alternative to incarceration program called ITAP here. And then we also have a partial hospitalization program here in our building. So those are going on. And as you can imagine, things go on with those programs over the course of every day. And then, just dealing with the day to day. And it is truly never the same day twice. There's always something to keep me busy.
I support Andrew's statement about the fact that he was so glad to see that you came up through the system, because here you sit in this role, but it's not like any part of it is foreign to you. You understand the clinical role, you understand the macro role, the policy role, and you've been to other settings, so you can really get a sense of an appreciation of collaboration, because collaboration is key. If somebody asked me to describe Andrew in a few sentences, one of the things I would say is he's a tremendous advocate of one door in, no need for separate doors. So Alyssa, could you bring up one of those pictures? So June of 2020, I'm driving down Route 9 and I see this. And I came out of the institutional world too. I worked for the state for over 20 years. So I worked in, institutions throughout the state. I'm driving down Route 9 and what do I see? I see what they're doing is they're tearing down the main building of Hudson River. This was, a place where 5,000 people hidden from the city, with the best of intentions when it first started, and then warehousing, as time goes on, hidden from the city, 5,000 people live there, and they're tearing it down. And the tagline is mental health at its best, the tearing down of walls. Because of the fact that, we have to try to figure out strategies to move away from stigma and isolation. And one of the things I think we've been very, very fortunate to be able to do and feel really good about it, we've been able to applaud recovery, through this whole discussion that's been going on. We've had many people that have joined us that have recovery stories from a couple of months to 39 years. And they talk about the value and the empowerment of recovery, which is important. So here you have one picture where, because each of those doors, as we always talk about, had a room, and each of those rooms had a person in it. And one of the things that I talk to my students about is you never want to engage with a person based upon their diagnosis. Diagnosis is secondary. You have to remember that there's a person there with a family, regardless of the tag of the diagnosis. So that's one picture that we put up. The other picture that we put up, Andrew's going to explain, because this is a very powerful picture as well of the way it is today and the way it should continue to be. And Alyssa's going to bring up that picture, and it shows you a whole different paradigm in the symbol of it.
Yeah, so the MHA founder of the National MHA, and now which has 245 affiliates throughout the country, is Clifford Beers. And Clifford Beers was a psychiatrist, or maybe a medical doctor. Anyway, he was hospitalized for depression at one of these psychiatric institutions in the early 1900s. And what he experienced was obviously traumatic, to say the least. Chained to walls and hosed with fire hoses, and it just they did what they thought was the best thing back then. But anyway, he got out. He finally got out, and he founded MHAs. And he said, you know, I want to call. I'm calling out. Send me your shackles and your chains, and I'm going to forge a future. And he forged this bell, which is about the size of the Liberty Bell. And it's part of our national organization, and they ring it every year at our national conference in Washington. And this bell was completely forged from the chains and the shackles from all these institutions that sent them stuff. And we've evolved over time. You know, we've become a little more humane as we learned, and we shut down these hospitals, and we pushed money into the community to provide care management and all sorts of other stuff. But unfortunately, the way we've evolved is that they've watered down case management a little bit through health homes. Greatest of his intentions, but prior to health homes, the caseloads for case managers in the community dealing with behavioral health was 20 to 30 to 12. And now, because of the reimbursement rate and the whole change in the whole process, the caseloads are 45 or 50. So that gets watered down. There's no more beds for people to go into. You know, now we had 12,000 beds in Dutchess County in 2 hospitals. Now we have zero. Zero. We had 200. I thought was a 250. I thought that was a good number. I think we needed this long-term option for people. Not a lifetime option, but a longer term option, because it gave us a little bit of movement for people that needed to be attended to in the emergency room and then held on a local hospital psychiatric unit, which was supposed to be short term. It always was. You'd be there for 7 days, and if maybe 14 days. And if you think, you know, I don't see an end in sight right here with this guy, he's not coming back really well. Let's move him to the state hospital, and he can stay there for, you know, a little longer. And then you free up a bed, and then things move. And now these beds are closed down. Rockland Psych Center is the closest one, which has limited beds as well. And so, you know, what we've done, which I think government always does, is swung the pendulum too far. And, you know, I have very close colleagues who would argue that that's not the case. You know, we don't need these hospitals anymore. And you know, they may be right, but you have to fund better community services then, and more in-depth community services, because people are failing, and Jean Marie sees it just like I do. People are failing all over this country. They were hidden in jail for a while, hidden in prisons for a while. And now bail reform has happened, and people are discharged from there, thankfully. But now, you know, we see people failing in their housing, homeless. Services like ours will get somebody housed, but we're not aides living with them. You know, that's not what this is set up to be like. And Larry came from the OPWDD world, where there was a ton of support around individuals. We don't have that in the mental health world. We don't have that level of support. So unfortunately, what happens is many times it fails, and they end up homeless again. And so it's you know, I'm just curious, Jean Marie, your take on that. I mean, that's the way I see it. And I don't think the answer is build up a whole new state hospital system, but I think that there needs to be something on a much larger scale than our pay grade to kind of reform this whole system.
I couldn't agree more. And it's this conversation is so timely. The other day I was in a meeting, we were talking about exactly really what you're saying, which is that, but we were talking about it in the context of the criminal justice system, and how, and the impact of bail reform. The conversation was really around how, for people with substance use disorder, we have longer term options. Someone can go to rehab for a long term. They can do a 6-month rehabilitation program for substance use disorder, or the judge can say to the person, we understand that the reason you've become entangled in the criminal justice system is because you have a behavioral health condition, and we'd like to offer you treatment instead of incarceration. And so they would come to a program, such as ITAP or something else. And then we would also offer them housing support, and they would live in a house with support and staff. So they're in a safe and stable environment while attending programming every day. But, we realize that there is no replication of that for people with behavioral health conditions. So if a person with a behavioral health condition, let's just take perhaps schizophrenia, for example, who maybe could be homeless or could not be homeless, but becomes entangled in the criminal justice system. There's nowhere for them to receive a longer term treatment that they may be in need of, other than the jail. I mean, they would end up in jail, which is absolutely not the appropriate place for them. So we would like to challenge ourselves here in Dutchess County to be able to create a system where individuals always have a treatment option, no matter what the problem is. So it doesn't matter if you have a opioid use disorder or schizophrenia. We would like to create a system where everyone is given the same opportunity for supportive help, whatever that looks like for them.
The three of us have had long-term clinical experience, and there are times that there are cases and faces and people that we'll never forget, that have influenced our thinking, our lives. And I remember Oliver Sacks, famous neurologist, did this book called the man who mistook his wife for a hat. And it was his 20 or 25 clinical cases that he remembered. And he wrote the book. So I'm teaching a theories of social casework class, and I love Oliver Sacks. So I'm going to go into the class and I'm going to share each week a different case that I worked on, confidentiality assured, the whole bit, but just, the scenario. I realized by the 5th week, if I continued that, all those human service and psych majors would have been business majors, because I was scaring them. And I didn't even realize I was scaring them, because what I had seen was so natural, except there were things that stood out. One time I was asked to go down to Rockland Psych to evaluate somebody. It's a lock unit. You go in, boom, they lock you, lock the gate behind you, lock the gate ahead of you, then you're on the unit. Coming down the unit is this young woman, inappropriately dressed, plunging blouse, high skirt, flipping her pocketbook like this, with beautiful red lipstick on, except it was around her lips, not on her lips. As I'm walking down the hall, she bumps into me. Excuse me, and I kept walking. I go into this room. There's 2 therapy aides there that work for the state, just like I work for the state. I'm waiting for the person I'm going to evaluate. Who's at the door, at the window, looking in, doing all sorts of bizarre things on the glass with the red lipstick, is that person that was in the hallway. And these 2 fellows start talking about her as not in a very positive way. Look at her, this is, the whole bit. I finish interviewing my person. I'm ready to leave, but who's back at the door? This person. I opened the door and she said to me, "You don't remember me, do you?" Now, meanwhile, these 2 guys have been talking disparagingly about her behavior and stuff. And I said, no, I don't remember you. And she said, "You're Larry Force, aren't you?" Then the next thing I could hear is these 2 guys jumping, dropping to the floor. They could, how would you know? I said, "I am." She said, "You don't remember me, do you?" And I said, "No, I don't, I'm sorry." She said, "I was a student in your class." And then all of a sudden it hit me. I remember because we were teaching courses over at Harlem Valley for Dutchess. And she was an aide that worked at Harlem Valley, and she was going for her associate's degree. And then all of a sudden it hit me. I do remember her. She used to come into the class with these big hats. Some students arrive on time. Some students arrive, innocently late. But there are some students that make an appearance at every class. And she was one of the ones that made an appearance, after everybody was settled. On the way home, I was thinking, the sad part is, what got her there? The other sad part is that they only knew her from what they saw. They didn't know that she had a history. And the only way that you could, because what got her there was the mingling of drugs and alcohol and And then all of a sudden, the manifesting psychiatric issues, and she's on a locked unit. And it was really profound. And I think what you're both arguing for, and can I throw out a word to challenge both of you? Don't forget, I'm coming from the academic theoretical realm now. You're coming from the practice policy perspective. But what do I hear? I hear, why don't we do a pilot study? Why don't we try this? Because what you're saying, both of you, makes a lot of sense. The pendulum has gone too far. We're not talking about institutionalizing people. But the sad day for me before I retired from the state is when I realized that in order to get access to a service that I needed for a client who was a state resident in a state facility, I had to access Massachusetts because New York didn't have it. And I think that, as innovative as we are and as collaborative as we are, maybe we should obviously continue this conversation to see if there is opportunity. Because look at you're coming from the policy side now. You're coming from the practice side. You know how to do residential homes. Well, maybe we should think about, is there a way that we could try this? Because I think it would be a model.
I got a phone call just the other day, and she's supposed to call me this week from a woman who has, and I actually was thinking about just having it as a respite housing or something. But when Jean Marie mentioned that, and this county was thinking about some alternatives, and your description of the mental health person, the old community residents, the old Sockers come to mind, which they're not available anymore.
Right.
But this
Exactly.
woman called me and she said she has a house in Poughkeepsie. It has 8 bedrooms, and it's zoned, she said, as a 2-family or a rooming house. And I thought, I doubt it, but maybe it is. And it's on the outskirts. It's in the town of Poughkeepsie. And anyway, she wanted me to look at it, and I thought I would look at it to see if it makes sense for MHA to have as like a respite house for placing homeless individuals who need 2-week or a month stay. And so I'm going to look at it, but if it makes a lot of sense, maybe I'll come back to you, Jean Marie, because maybe the county does want to do some type of pilot thing and do another community residence of some, do another community residence like the Sockers used to be for the state operated people. But that's not something I could do on my own because that requires staffing 24/7 and all that other stuff. But we got to do something.
When I worked for the state, there was a director of a DDSO, Developmental Disability Service Organization. And this is way before downloadable links. He said to me, did I see what PBS did on this Dr. Bill Thomas? Harvard trained MD, he's up in Utica, he's running around the country yelling at nursing homes, tear down your walls, make small group homes, because he has 2 disabled young children. Bring in the animals, bring in the smell of food, make it no more of these, mega, complexes. So I called him. I got the thing from PBS. So I looked at it. I called him. I introduced myself. I said, I got to tell you, that was so profound. I mean, it was because he's doing it out of the care of his own children. He wants to change the system. So that was very profound. I said, but could I ask you something? He said, what's that? I said, what you're advocating for really looks like our group homes that we have in existence already, but you're taking it to a new arena, to the aging nursing home arena. He said, that's what I am advocating. That's the model I'm basing it on. So we know how to do this, with small group homes. Doesn't mean, 5,000 beds, but small, we know how to do this and we can learn from other systems. And maybe this is the challenge that we have, maybe this time, 18 months from now, we're saying, look at what we've been able to accomplish.
Interesting. I feel like we talk more than Jean Marie.
Well, it's an informal exchange. Okay, and what did we say? The video cast goes for 3.5 hours. Jean Marie has another 3 hours.
What do you think about all this, Jean Marie? I'm not saying what do you think about this proposal. I just said because that's something for another day. But
yeah, I think the whole system, everyone that I talk to from every angle is saying the same thing.
Yeah.
There is a missing link. There's a gap in our system of care. There are people, even I'm sure you all are familiar with like ACT teams. So, you have individuals who are going from a pretty high level of care, which would be an ACT team. They might get 2 or 3 visits a week when they're on ACT through their ACT team folks. And then eventually when a person graduates off of ACT team, they're getting discharged to clinic-based services. And that's a very big jump. And when you don't have a proper transition or a proper continuum of care for individuals, if the jump is too big, you're going to lose them. You go from having too much, go from having a really nice support wraparound service where an individual can really thrive to, and absolutely nothing against outpatient services, but it's just not the right level of care for everybody. So you see a lot of people fall into a dark hole between going from these levels of care. We see it, and Andrew, I know you can say this too. We see it with folks from the hospital. When they're coming out of the hospital, and post psychiatric hospitalization for an acute mental health problem is a really sensitive time, and to see an individual then transition from that level of care to an outpatient clinic or even a partial hospital program, it's often not enough. And then the individual, if not supported properly through that continuum, ends up back in the hospital, which nobody wants, because it can be very traumatizing, and it takes a person out of their life. And we want them to stay in their life, but we want them to be healthy in their life. So it's, if we sat down, if Andrew and I sat down and compared notes, I bet we could name, the top 20 individuals that we know in this community that we watch continually cycle through our emergency room, our jail, our courts, our homeless shelters, these folks that we just know need more. And what I'm advocating for at this point in my career is really taking a look at our system, really identifying and defining the population that we want to target, creating a system that is going to address the needs of those individuals, and then figuring out how to fund it, which I know sounds backwards, but what I've noticed is when we start to have these conversations, there's so many obstacles that present themselves that as we talk, people say, well, we can't do it because of this, or we can't do it because of that, or no, that's never going to work, or for whatever reason. And there's just millions of reasons why nothing is going to work, to the point where you never get to any kind of solution-focused conversation. So, right now, what I'm trying to do is bring together the people to have conversations about, all right, what can we do? What does it look like? How do we do it? And how do we get it done? Then let's get the model together, and then let's figure out how we're going to pay for it, and those are the kinds of things that we're trying to do now, because everybody, no matter what part of the system you're from, even family members, that's another really great, what a wonderful untapped resource in many ways. A lot of these individuals have supportive families that are incredibly frustrated with the way things are right now, because they want their family members to be successful and lead a happy, healthy life, and they're frustrated with the system as well, because it's not able to give the support to individuals to help them be as successful as they can be.
It took about 7 years, but there is a precedent for how it works now. So in this county, through Steve Michio from People Incorporated and the county working collaboratively with other agencies, they were able to make a stabilization center. This is a 24/7 urgent care center in this community that somebody can go to for mental health or addiction issues. And if it should be the right place to start. You go there, you talk to somebody. It's not a sterile hospital system. You're in there talking to a person and just trying to figure it all out, working with the family. What's the next step? What's the next plan? So they did this, and the county funded it. And there didn't have to be rules. OASAS got involved, and there were some rules, but reality is we asked for waivers. We were saying this is something new. The OASAS didn't know what it was. OMATES didn't know what it was. They let us go for it. And we designed something in this county, and then OMH watched it and saw it in OASAS, and now they're building up regulations to replicate it throughout. But that's what we need with your idea. I think it's a good idea. Figure out what we need, find a funder that's not going to hold our hands tight and not let us try the things we want to do because it's not in the normal realm of how things are done. And then see if it works. It's a pilot, like Larry said. Figure it out, try it, and see if somebody will say, hey, it does work. We'll fund it now.
I have a sign over my desk and it says, visionary people are visionary because of what they don't see. I've been talking with this fellow who's from Israel, and he has this philosophy that he's promoting. And one of the things he says is, where you look is where you're going. And I shared that with Alyssa earlier today. She said, that sounds like Buddha. But one of the things that he talks about is, the person's past doesn't dictate the future. The future dictates the future. And one of the things I wanted to ask you, not to get a commitment of a date yet, but we're going to launch season 4 in 2022. And one of the things that I want to be able to embed in this, and I talked to Andrew about, is the role of technology in delivering services. I tell my students, there's 2 things you have to take into a family's life today: your heart and an understanding of technology. You can only take one, you take your heart, but you can't act as though this doesn't matter. The idea of mobile technology to support people in need. So we're going to come back to you and ask you, to join us for that conversation. And if you could be starting to think about that, because not everything is a brick and mortar solution either. And if there's a way that we could build, a hybrid model that could be tested, let's go. So I think we're at the point of summary. So I think I'm going to turn it back to Andrew now, and he's going to ask you any summary points, and then we're going to go to Alyssa, and she's going to bring it to close. And one of the things she's going to ask you for is, because one of the things that we've talked about throughout all of this is, even during COVID, support services are open for business. We're open. We're a phone call away, a text away, whatever away. We're open, and you don't have to do this alone. So Andrew, some summary, and then Jean Marie.
Well, there's so much more that Jean Marie could comment on. I mean, there's the 988 rollout that's going to impact this country. There's all sorts of things. And but one of the things that this county does have is a plethora of services, including the main one, which is Helpline. So maybe Jean Marie, you could tell everybody who they could reach out to here in this county. And even if you're not in this county, I'm sure Helpline will find a place for you, and maybe your contact information if anybody's interested in reaching out to you to clarify anything.
Sure. So Helpline here in Dutchess County we're 24 hours a day. We never close. You can get in touch with someone to talk to 24 hours anytime. So that phone number is 845-485-9700, and that's talk or text. So if you don't feel comfortable making a phone call, you can just text, and staff there will text you back. And of course, we also have the Stabilization Center. Just like Helpline, Stabilization Center is a wonderful place to access information, resources, and support of all kinds. They will welcome you in with open arms and get you connected with the services that we have here in Dutchess County and beyond, if that's what's necessary. And that is at 230 North Road in Poughkeepsie. And my phone number is 845-486-3791, and you can call me anytime, and I'd be happy to speak with you more about anything that I discussed today or any other topic.
Thank you.
It's wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us.
Amazing. Well, thank you guys, and thank you, Jean Marie. And thank you for watching. You've been listening to Intersections, Policy, Program, and Practice Exchange. And if you want to hear this program again, share it with friends, log on to our Digital Resource Center on our website, www.intersections-exchange.org. There you can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Until next time.